Hello everyone, and welcome back to Cryptic Corpse. Here on this channel, I share real-life, scary stories about strange things that happen to help you relax and fall asleep. Before we start, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from now. Find a comfortable place to sit back and let's begin. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm 45 years old and I live alone in the northern Minnesota wilderness, about 40 miles from the nearest town. Some folks might call me crazy for staying out here, especially during winter when the temperature drops to 30 below zero. But after what happened in Korea, and then losing Sarah and little Jenny in that car crash 3 years ago, well, being alone just feels right. I built this cabin with my own hands. It's nothing fancy, just logs, a stone fireplace, and a roof that keeps most of the snow out. My nearest neighbor, if you can call him that, is old Murphy, who lives about 5 miles east. We check on each other once a month, trading supplies and making sure neither of us has frozen to death. It's an arrangement that works for both of us. Neither asks too many questions about why the other chose to leave the world behind. Today marks my second winter out here. The first snow came early this year, blanketing the pines in white before October ended. I've got my traps set along the creek, an ice fishing hole on the lake, and enough canned food to last until spring if I'm careful. My 3 sled dogs, Rex, Buddy, and Scout, are my only real company. Rex is the oldest, a tough Alaskan Malamute who seems to understand me better than most people ever did. The forest feels different this winter, quieter. The only sounds most days are the wind, whistling through the pines, and the occasional wolf howl in the distance. Sometimes the lakes crack like gunshots in the night as the ice shifts. My own breathing seems too loud when I'm out checking traps. About 3 miles from my cabin, there's an old logging camp that's been abandoned for decades. Rotting buildings, rusted equipment, and a small graveyard with wooden crosses. Nobody comes there anymore. Local folks say there was an accident. Back in '32, a whole crew of loggers, 12 men in all, went missing during a blizzard. Search parties never found them. Just empty bunkhouses and cold stoves. I don't put much stock in ghost stories, but I avoid that place all the same. Something about it feels wrong, like the land itself remembers what happened. My leg, the one with shrapnel still in it from Korea, aches whenever I get too close. Last night, I woke up around 3 a.m. The dogs were huddled together in the corner, whimpering. Outside, the aurora was lighting up the sky, but the colors were all wrong. Sickly greens and purples I've never seen before. For a moment, I thought I heard Jenny laughing, the way she used to when we played hide-and-seek. I know better, of course. The isolation plays tricks on your mind if you let it. That's why I keep their photos on my nightstand and talk to them sometimes. The whiskey helps with the nightmares. Most nights, anyway. Yesterday, while checking my trap line, I noticed something odd. Footprints in the snow, big ones, at least 18 inches long. Too big for a bear, and shaped all wrong. They circled around my cabin, stopping at each window, then headed off into the trees. The dogs wouldn't go near them. Murphy's due to visit in a few days. Maybe he's seen something similar. Until then, I'll keep my rifle loaded and the door barred at night. Out here, you'll learn to trust your instincts. And right now, my instincts are screaming that something's watching me from the trees. Something hungry. 3 days passed, and Murphy didn't show up. That wasn't like him. Even in the worst weather, he'd always make the trip. I decided to check on him. I hooked the dogs to the sled early the next morning. The temperature had dropped overnight, and my breath made thick clouds in front of my face. Rex kept looking back at me, whining softly. He didn't want to go. The other dogs seemed nervous too. "It's okay, boy," I said, patting his head. "Just a quick trip to Murphy's and back." The forest felt wrong that day. Usually, I know these woods like the back of my hand. Every tree, every rock, every dip in the trail. But that morning, nothing looked quite right. Paths I'd taken 100 times seemed to shift and twist. Twice I had to stop and check my compass, which kept spinning in circles before settling. It took us 3 hours to reach Murphy's cabin. It should have taken 1. I knew something was wrong before I even knocked. There were no smoke coming from his chimney, and the snow around his door was untouched. Rex wouldn't go near the cabin. He stood at the edge of the clearing, hackles raised, growling at nothing I could see. "Murphy," I called, pounding on his door. No answer. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open, and the smell hit me like a punch. Rotten meat and something worse. I covered my nose with my scarf and stepped inside. Murphy was there, or what was left of him. I won't describe what I saw. I've seen men die in Korea, seen things no one should see, but this was different. Worse, something had torn him apart. Not an animal, at least not any animal I know. His bones were cracked open, like something had been after the marrow inside. I found his journal on the table. The last entry was from 5 days ago. Asterisk, it's watching me. I hear it moving around outside at night, scratching at the walls. Yesterday I found marks on the trees around my cabin. Claw marks, 15 feet up. No bear can reach that high. I think it's what got the Miller family back in '58. They said it was a bear attack, but I never believed it. The Ojibwe have stories about these woods, about the Wendigo, a spirit that possesses people, makes them hungry for human flesh. I always thought they were just stories. Asterisk, I closed the journal and put it in my pack. My hands were shaking, not from the cold. I buried what I could of Murphy in the frozen ground. It took hours to dig even a shallow grave. The whole time I felt eyes on me from the tree line, watching, waiting. The dogs were restless on the trip back, jumping at every sound. The sky darkened early, and I knew we wouldn't make it home before nightfall. I pushed them harder than I should have. About halfway back, Scout stopped suddenly, nearly causing a pileup. He was staring into the trees, trembling. I followed his gaze, but saw nothing. Then I heard it, a voice calling my name. Thomas, ... help me, ... double quotes. It was Sarah's voice, my dead wife's voice, coming from the darkest part of the forest. Thomas, ... I'm cold, ... come help me, ... My heart nearly stopped. It couldn't be her, I knew that, but it sounded exactly like her, the same soft way she'd call me when she needed help with something heavy. Dad, Daddy, where are you? Jenny's voice now, high and scared, like when she'd wake from a bad dream. I felt my legs move before I could stop myself. One step toward the voices, then another. Rex's snarl snapped me back. He lunged against his harness, barking furiously at the trees. The voices stopped. I got back on the sled, hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the reins. Go, Rex, go, I shouted, and we took off through the trees, away from whatever was calling to me with my family's voices. We made it back after dark. I barred the door, loaded my shotgun, and sat with my back to the wall all night. Outside, something circled my cabin, its footsteps crunching in the snow. Heavy footsteps, too heavy for a man. It stopped outside each window, like it was looking in. The dogs huddled around me, silent and trembling. Even Rex, who'd faced down wolves before, wouldn't leave my side. Morning came, and I found more tracks around my cabin, the same huge footprints I'd seen before. And something new, my axe, which I'd left by the woodpile, was found buried deep in a tree 30 yards away. The handle was splintered, like it had been swung with incredible force. I hadn't touched it. That day, I found all my traps sprung or destroyed. Something had torn through my trap line, ruining everything. The few animals I'd caught were gone, not taken, but torn apart and left scattered across the snow. My food wouldn't last forever. The temperature kept dropping, and whatever had killed Murphy was now watching me. I was alone in the wilderness, 40 miles from help, with something hungry circling my cabin, and the long winter had just begun. A week passed after finding Murphy. The days grew shorter, the nights longer. I started losing track of time. My watch stopped working at sunset one day and wouldn't start again. The radio picked up nothing but static, sometimes broken by whispers I couldn't quite make out. I tried to convince myself there were normal explanations for everything. The footprints could be from a bear walking funny. The voices in the woods were just the wind playing tricks. Murphy might have been killed by wolves. People who spend too much time alone start seeing things that aren't there. I know that, but deep down, I knew better. One morning, I woke up to find the dogs acting strange. Buddy and Scout were fighting over their food, snarling and snapping at each other. They'd never done that before. Rex tried to break it up and got bitten for his trouble. I had to pull them apart. That same day, I noticed the food in my cabin was spoiling. Meat I'd smoked and stored properly was suddenly rotten, even though it was cold enough to freeze solid. It smelled awful, like it had been sitting in the sun for days. I had to throw most of it out. That night, I heard something on the roof. Heavy footsteps, moving back and forth. The whole cabin shook. The dogs went crazy, barking and howling. Then came the scratching, like huge claws dragging across the wood, right above my bed. I fired a shot through the roof. The noise stopped for a moment, then started again, more frantic this time. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I climbed up to check the damage. There were deep gouges in the wood, splintered and torn. No animal I know could make marks like that. And there was something else, a strange symbol carved into one of the logs, a spiral with strange markings around it. It looked old, like something you might find on cave walls. I decided to go back to the abandoned logging camp. If something weird was happening in these woods, maybe there were clues there. It was a stupid idea, but I was running out of options. The dogs didn't want to go. I had to drag them to the sled. Even Rex, always loyal, tried to pull away, but I needed them. I couldn't make the trip alone. The camp looked different in winter. Snow covered the old buildings, making them look like strange lumps rising from the ground. The wooden crosses in the small graveyard were barely visible. I tied the dogs to a tree at the edge of the camp. They wouldn't stop whining. The hair on their backs stood straight up. "Stay here," I told them. "I won't be long." The main bunkhouse was half collapsed. The roof caved in from years of heavy snow. Inside, everything was covered in dust and ice. Bunks still had moldy blankets on them. A table with playing cards scattered across it. Coffee cups frozen solid, like everyone had just disappeared in the middle of their day. I found a trapdoor in the floor, hidden under an old rug. It wasn't locked. When I pulled it open, cold air rushed up, carrying a smell that made me gag. The same rotten meat smell. From Murphy's cabin, there was a ladder leading down into darkness. I should have turned back then. Every instinct told me to run, but I needed answers. I climbed down, flashlight in one hand, rifle in the other. The beam cut through the darkness, showing me a small cellar dug into the earth, and what was inside? Bones. Hundreds of bones. Human bones, arranged in a huge spiral pattern. In the center was a pile of skulls. 12 skulls. The missing loggers. The bones had marks on them. Teeth marks, like they'd been gnawed clean. My hands shook so bad I almost dropped the flashlight. That's when I noticed writing on the wall. Words scratched into the dirt with fingernails. "The hunger never stops." And below that, "We became what we ate." I heard a noise behind me. A soft thud, like something heavy landing on the floor above. Then footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving toward the trapdoor. I switched off my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall, trying not to breathe. The footsteps stopped right above the open trapdoor. I could hear breathing, wet, raspy breathing. Something was leaning over the opening. I couldn't see it in the dark, but I could feel it looking down at me, searching. A drop of something hot and wet fell on my cheek. It burned like acid. I had to bite my tongue to keep from crying out. Then came a sound that froze my blood, sniffing, like a predator catching a scent. My scent. A howl from outside broke the silence. Rex, barking frantically. The thing above me made a sound, a sort of hissing growl. Then the footsteps moved away, toward the door of the bunkhouse. I didn't wait. I scrambled up the ladder, threw myself through the trapdoor, and ran for the exit, not daring to look back. Outside, the dogs were going crazy, pulling at their ropes, trying to get free, and standing at the edge of the trees was ... something tall and thin, with long arms that nearly touched the ground. I only caught a glimpse before it melted back into the forest. I untied the dogs, jumped on the sled, and we tore out of there like the devil himself was chasing us. Maybe he was. Halfway home, I realized we were being followed. I could hear it moving through the trees parallel to us, branches snapping as it passed. Sometimes it would get ahead of us, and I'd catch a flash of movement crossing the path. It was playing with us, herding us. We made it back to the cabin just as the sun was setting. I barricaded the door with everything I could move. Table, chairs, boxes. The windows to that night was the worst yet. It circled the cabin for hours, testing each door and window. The dogs huddled under my bed, too scared to even bark now. At one point, it pressed its face against the window, a gaunt, stretched face with skin pulled tight over bone, eyes that glowed yellow in the darkness. It tapped on the glass with long, blackened fingers, like it was asking to be invited in. I must have passed out from exhaustion eventually. When I woke up, the sun was shining. Outside my door was a dead deer, not just dead, torn open, its insides arranged in that same spiral pattern I'd seen in the cellar, like an offering or a warning. My food stores were getting lower. The dogs were eating less, growing thin and nervous. And I started having blackouts. Moments where I'd find myself standing outside without remembering how I got there. Or discover journal entries in my handwriting that I had no memory of writing. One entry scared me more than anything. Asterisk, the hunger burns inside me now. I dream of warm flesh. The dogs look at me differently. They know. Asterisk, it wasn't my handwriting, but it was in my journal, written with my pencil. Something was getting inside. My head and I was running out of time. 2 weeks after finding Murphy's body, a blizzard hit, the worst I'd ever seen. Snow piled up past my windows in hours. The wind howled so loud it drowned out everything else. I was trapped inside with the dogs, with no way to check my traps or fish on the lake. On the second day of the storm, I noticed Buddy watching me strangely. He wouldn't come when I called him. His eyes looked different, yellower, with pupils that seemed too small. When I reached out to pet him, he snapped at my hand, missing by inches. That night, I woke to growling. Scout and Buddy were standing at the foot of my bed, teeth bared. Rex stood between them and me, his hackles raised. For a terrible moment, nobody moved. Then Buddy lunged at me. Rex intercepted him, and the two dogs crashed to the floor, snarling and biting. Scout joined in, going for Rex's throat. I jumped up and grabbed my rifle, using the butt to separate them. Buddy's teeth caught my arm, tearing through my shirt, and into the skin beneath. The pain was shocking. I managed to lock Scout and Buddy in the root cellar beneath the cabin. They threw themselves against the door for hours, making horrible sounds that didn't seem like they could come from dogs. Rex stayed by my side, but he was badly hurt. Bite marks covered his neck and sides. I cleaned his wounds as best I could, then bandaged my own arm. The bite throbbed with pain, and by morning, dark lines were spreading from it up toward my shoulder. The storm lasted 3 days. When it finally stopped, I opened the door to the root cellar. Buddy and Scout were gone. The wooden door was splintered from the inside, and a hole was dug through the dirt floor. They'd escaped somehow, though it should have been impossible. I needed medicine for my arm. The infection was getting worse, turning my skin black around the bite, and Rex needed help too. I decided to risk the journey to town, even in the deep snow. I packed what supplies I could and hitched Rex to the sled. He was our only dog now, and he was weak, but we had no choice. We set out at dawn. The trail was almost invisible under the fresh snow. The going was slow and painful. My arm felt like it was on fire, and Rex was struggling to pull even the lightened sled. By noon, we'd only gone a few miles. That's when I spotted them, Scout and Buddy, standing on a ridge above us. Their fur was matted with blood and something black, like tar. Their bodies looked wrong somehow, too thin, with legs that seemed longer than before. And their eyes glowed yellow in the shadows of the trees. They weren't alone. Behind them stood a figure that made my heart stop. Tall, at least 9 feet, and impossibly thin. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in long-fingered hands with blackened claws. Its face was stretched and gaunt, with skin pulled tight over a skull that wasn't quite human, and antlers, actual antlers, rose from its head, like a crown of bones. The Wendigo, I knew its name now, understood what it was. Not just a legend or a spirit, but something real, something hungry. It raised one long arm and pointed at me. Scout and Buddy howled, a sound no dog should make, and started down the ridge toward us. Rex barked once, then pulled hard on the sled, veering off the trail into the thick trees. The sudden movement nearly threw me off, but I held on as we crashed through the underbrush. Behind us, I could hear Scout and Buddy in pursuit, their paws thumping on the snow. We couldn't outrun them, not with Rex injured and the sled bogging down in the deep snow. I saw a fallen tree ahead, creating a small shelter underneath where its roots had torn free of the ground. I steered Rex toward it, then cut him free from the harness. "Go home, boy," I told him, looking into his loyal eyes. "Go home," he whined, not wanting to leave me, but I pushed him away and slapped his flank. "Go," Rex took off through the trees just as Scout and Buddy burst into the clearing. They hesitated, momentarily confused by the scent trail splitting in two. Then Scout went after Rex, while Buddy turned toward my hiding spot. I had my rifle ready. When Buddy came close enough, I could see that he wasn't really a dog anymore. His jaw had elongated, filled with too many teeth. His paws had stretched into something like hands. When he spotted me, he made a sound that was almost a laugh. I shot him. I had no choice. The bullet hit him in the chest, and he went down, thrashing in the snow. But he didn't die. He started to get back up, the wound already closing. I ran, left the sled and everything except my rifle and the knife on my belt. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I found myself in a part of the forest I didn't recognize. Though I thought I knew these woods by heart, night was falling. I needed shelter. I spotted a rock outcropping and made my way toward it, hoping to find a cave or at least some protection from the wind. What I found was much worse. It was the old logging camp again. Somehow, I'd run in a circle, or the camp had moved, or I didn't know anymore. Nothing made sense. But there it was, the collapsed bunkhouse and the small graveyard, just as I'd left them. Except now, fresh tracks lead into the main building, human tracks. And I heard something from inside, a voice calling for help. "Hello, is anyone there? Please, I'm hurt." A man's voice, desperate and afraid. It sounded real. I approached slowly, rifle ready. The door to the bunkhouse was open, swinging slightly in the wind. Inside was dark, but I could make out a figure, slumped against the far wall. "Thank God," the man said when he saw me. "I'd been lost for days. Twisted my ankle. I thought I was going to die out here." He looked normal, just a hiker who'd gotten lost in the storm. But something felt wrong. Why would he come to this abandoned camp? How had he survived the blizzard? "What's your name?" I asked, staying by the door. James Miller," he said. "Please, I need help getting back to town." Miller, the same last name as the family Murphy mentioned in his journal. The family that supposedly died in a bear attack years ago. "There is no town," I said quietly. "Not anymore." His face changed, not all at once, but slowly, like ice melting. His eyes turned yellow. His mouth stretched into a grin that was too wide, filled with teeth that were too sharp. "Thomas," he said, but now it wasn't a man's voice at all. It was Jenny's voice coming from his mouth, my daughter's voice. "Why did you let us die, Daddy? Why weren't you driving that night?" I backed toward the door, but it slammed shut behind me. The thing stood up, its body elongating, limbs stretching. "You could have saved us," it said with Sarah's voice now. "But you were too weak, just like you're too weak now." I raised my rifle and fired. The bullet hit it square in the chest, but it only laughed, a horrible, wet sound. The wound closed immediately, the bullet pushing back out and falling to the floor with a soft clink. "You can't kill hunger, Thomas," it said, its voice now a raspy growl. "You can only feed it." It lunged at me faster than I could react, knocking the rifle from my hands. I fell backward, hitting my head hard on the wooden floor. The thing loomed over me, its breath smelling of rotting meat and something worse, something old and dead. As it reached for me with those long, blackened fingers, I heard barking outside, frantic, desperate barking. Rex had come back for me. The Wendigo's head snapped toward the sound, momentarily distracted. I took my chance, drawing my knife and driving it deep into the creature's leg. It shrieked, a high, piercing sound that made my ears ring, and stumbled backward. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the door, throwing it open. Outside, Rex was barking at something in the trees. Scout, or what used to be Scout, circling and looking for a way to attack. "Rex, come," I shouted, running toward the trees on the opposite side of the clearing. Rex turned and ran to me, limping but still fast. Behind us, the Wendigo burst through the door of the bunkhouse, its antlers scraping the top of the frame. It let out another shriek, and Scout answered with a howl. They were both coming after us now. We ran through the forest, branches whipping at my face. I had no idea where we were going. I just knew we had to get away. Rex stayed right by my side, guiding me through the deepening darkness. Then I saw light ahead, warm, yellow light. My cabin. Somehow, we'd found our way back. I didn't question it, just ran faster. Rex beside me. We burst through the door, and I slammed it shut, throwing the bar across it. I grabbed my shotgun from above the fireplace and loaded it with trembling hands. Rex collapsed on the floor, panting hard, his wounds reopened and bleeding. Outside, something heavy moved through the snow toward the cabin. The windows rattled as the wind picked up. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees in seconds. It had followed us home, and this time there was nowhere left to run. Night fell completely. The only light in the cabin came from my old kerosene lamp and the dying embers in the fireplace. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, But beneath that sound was something else. Movement in the snow, circling the cabin, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, testing, waiting. I tended to Rex's wounds as best I could. He was weak, barely able to lift his head. His loyal eyes followed me as I moved around the cabin, boarding up the windows with whatever I could find. My own arm was worse. The bite had turned my skin black, and the dark lines now reached my shoulder. It felt cold, like it belonged to someone else, or something else. I found Murphy's journal in my pack and read through it again, looking for anything that might help. Near the end, there was an entry I'd missed before. Asterisk old Joe at the trading post told me how his grandfather fought a Wendigo once. Said there are rules. It can't enter your home unless invited. Mirrors drive it crazy. It can't stand to see what it's become. And fire. Fire is the only thing it truly fears. Asterisk, I didn't have any mirrors bigger than a shaving glass. But fire, that I could do. I gathered everything flammable. Spare clothes, books, even my family's photographs. I soaked them in kerosene and piled them near the door. If that thing got in, I'd light it all. Maybe burn down the whole cabin if I had to. The scratching started around midnight. Gentle at first, almost like a knock. It moved from the door to each window, then to the roof. I could hear it dragging itself across the wooden shingles, testing for weak spots. Thomas, it called, using Murphy's voice now. Let me in. Thomas, it's cold out here. I said nothing, just held the shotgun tighter. The voice changed. Daddy, Daddy, the bad dog bit me. I'm scared. Jenny's voice, small and frightened, just like the night of the accident. My heart twisted, and for a moment, just a moment, I almost went to the door. Rex growled weakly, bringing me back to my senses. This wasn't my daughter. Jenny was gone. You can't keep me out forever, the thing said, its voice changing again, to something inhuman, a raspy, wet sound. The hunger always finds a way in. The scratching turned to pounding. The whole cabin shook. Dust and snow fell from the rafters. A board over one of the windows cracked. Then came a new sound, a soft whining from outside. A dog in pain. Buddy, I whispered, though I knew it couldn't really be him anymore. The whining grew louder, more desperate. Despite everything, I felt myself drawn toward the window. I had to see. I peered through a crack in the boards. Outside in the moonlight was Buddy, or what was left of him. He was lying in the snow, his body twisted and wrong, but his eyes, for just a second, they looked like my dog's eyes again, pleading in pain. That's when something crashed through the roof on the other side of the cabin. I spun around as wooden shingles and snow poured in through a hole in the ceiling. Long, blackened fingers curled around the edges of the opening, pulling the hole wider. The Wendigo was breaking in from above. I fired the shotgun at the ceiling. The blast tore through more of the roof, sending splinters flying. There was a shriek from outside, but I couldn't tell if I'd hit it. Rex was on his feet now, barking at the hole in the roof despite his injuries. I grabbed the kerosene lamp and threw it at the pile of flammables by the door. The glass broke, and flames leaped up immediately, spreading faster than I expected. The smoke hit me first, thick and choking. I stumbled back, trying to grab my pack, but the fire was everywhere now. The dry wooden walls of the cabin caught quickly. Something massive dropped through the hole in the roof, the Wendigo, folding its long limbs as it landed in the middle of my burning home. It was even more terrifying up close. Its skin was pulled tight over bones that weren't quite human. Its mouth was too wide, filled with yellowed fangs, and its eyes were the worst part, because I recognized them. They were Murphy's eyes. The creature hissed at the flames, but didn't retreat. It fixed those stolen eyes on me and smiled. Your turn now, Thomas, it said in that wet, raspy voice. Your turn to feed the hunger. Rex lunged at it, his last act of loyalty. His teeth sank into the Wendigo's leg, and it shrieked in rage, trying to shake him off. But Rex held on, giving me the chance I needed. I ran for the back window, the only one not yet on fire. Behind me, I heard a terrible yelp cut suddenly short. Rex was gone. The window was stuck, swollen from the cold. I slammed my shoulder against it, once, twice, and finally it burst outward. I tumbled through into the snow outside, the cold air like a slap after the heat of the burning cabin. I didn't look back, just ran for the trees. The fire behind me cast long shadows across the snow, making the forest dance with twisted shapes. My lungs burned from the smoke, and my injured arm hung useless at my side. I don't know how far I ran. Time seemed to stretch and compress. Sometimes it felt like hours passed in minutes. Other times, I'd blink and find myself in a different part of the forest, with no memory of how I got there. The cold was the worst. Without shelter, without fire, the Minnesota winter would kill me as surely as the Wendigo. My thoughts became sluggish. The pain in my arm faded to a dull throb, then to nothing. Not a good sign. I found myself back at the frozen lake, the one I used to fish on. The ice looked solid, a flat white plain stretching into darkness. If I could cross it, maybe I could reach the road on the other side. Maybe find help. I stepped onto the ice. It creaked but held. One step, then another. The wind had swept parts of it clear of snow, making it slick and treacherous. Halfway across I heard it behind me, that dragging footstep, heavy on the ice. The Wendigo had followed me. Of course it had. The hunger never stops. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate anymore. I was too cold, too tired. I fell hard, skidding across the ice. When I rolled over, I saw it standing there, a dark silhouette against the night sky. Steam rose from its body. The heat of the fire had done nothing to it. No more running. "Thomas," it said, and its voice was different now. It was my voice. It knelt beside me, its face inches from mine. This close, I could see every detail of its ruined features, the stretched skin, the two sharp teeth, the antlers rising from its skull like a crown. "I am hunger," it whispered. "I am cold. I am the north wind. I am the winter itself." Its clawed hand reached for my face, almost gentle, almost loving. "And now, you are too." Something cracked beneath us. A spiderweb of fractures spread across the ice. The Wendigo's weight was too much. Before either of us could move, the surface gave way, and we plunged into the freezing water below. The cold hit me like 1,000 knives. All the air rushed from my lungs. The Wendigo thrashed beside me, its long limbs tangling with mine as we sank into the black water. I should have died then. Maybe I did. What I remember next is fractured, like pieces of a broken mirror, crawling onto the ice, dragging myself through the snow. A hunger unlike anything I'd ever felt before, burning inside me despite the cold. I found a cave, or maybe the cave found me. I huddled inside, my wet clothes freezing to my skin. I should have frozen to death that night. Instead, I burned with fever. My arm, the bitten one, changed. The skin hardened and darkened. My fingers stretched, the nails growing long and sharp. And the hunger, always the hunger. Days passed, or weeks. I lost track. Sometimes I'd wake to find animals around me, rabbits, foxes, even a young deer once, all dead, all torn open, all eaten. I told myself it wasn't me. It couldn't be me. But the blood on my hands, under my nails, that was real. My reflection changed in the pools of melted snow. My face grew gaunt, my teeth sharpened, and sometimes, when I looked out at the corner of my eye, I thought I saw the beginnings of antlers sprouting from my head. Spring came eventually. The snow melted. Search parties found my burned-out cabin. They found Murphy's body too, what was left of it. They even found my journal, somehow preserved despite the fire. But they never found me. Sometimes, on cold nights, when the wind blows just right, I watched the cabins of those who've moved into these woods. I watched their lights go out one by one. I listened to their breathing through the walls, and I whisper their names, using voices they love and trust. The hunger never stops. It just finds a new host. My name was Thomas Brennan. Now I am the Wendigo, and winter is coming again. My name is Daniel Cortez. I'm 52 years old, and I've been digging holes in the earth since I was strong enough to lift a shovel. Mining engineer, that's what they call me. What they used to call me. Anyway, 3 weeks ago, I drove out to this abandoned claim in the Mojave Desert. Just me and my dog Rusty in an old pickup loaded with supplies. The kind of place most folks would call God-forsaken miles of nothing but scrubland, twisted Joshua trees, and rocks baking under a merciless sun. I came here to be alone, to work, to forget. But the desert doesn't let you forget. The claim belonged to an old mining buddy who died last year. Cancer. At least, that's a death you can see coming. Not like what happened to my crew. 8 good men who trusted me to keep them safe underground. 8 men who never came back up because of a mistake I made. The cave-in happened 2 years ago. I should have noticed the support beams weren't set right, should have heard the warning groans of the earth. But I was tired, cutting corners to meet a deadline. By the time I realized something was wrong, it was too late. I was the only one who made it out. The company cleared me of wrongdoing, called it an accident. But I know better. So here I am, setting up camp next to an abandoned mineshaft that hasn't been worked in decades. The previous owner's cabin is mostly standing, just needed a new roof and some patching up. There's a well that gives enough water if you're careful, and solar panels I rigged up to power a small generator. During the day, it's hot enough to fry an egg on a rock. At night, the cold cuts right through you. The silence is the worst part. Sometimes it gets so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat, your own thoughts, and my thoughts aren't good company these days. First few days were normal enough. I spent my time fixing up the cabin, checking the old mine entrances, and mapping out the claim. Rusty seemed happy enough, chasing lizards and barking at nothing. But there's something about this place that doesn't sit right. The locals in the last town I passed through wouldn't talk about it much, just said the claim had bad luck. Native burial ground nearby, they said. Site of an old massacre. The usual desert ghost stories. I don't believe in ghosts. What haunts me are memories, not spirits. But last night, as I was falling asleep, I could have sworn I heard voices calling from the main shaft. My crew's voices, calling my name. And this morning, I found a pile of small animal bones, arranged in a perfect circle, outside my door. Probably just coyotes, I told myself. Desert plays tricks on your mind. I'm here to work this claim, maybe. Find enough gold to make up for what those families lost when their men died. It won't bring them back, but it's something. It's the only thing I can think to do. What I didn't know then was that the desert was already working on me, and it had plans of its own. I've been here 2 weeks now. Something isn't right. It started with small things, tools that weren't where I left them. The generator shutting down at the same time every night, right as the sun drops behind the mountains. I checked it over and over. Nothing wrong with it. But still, every night at sunset, it dies. Rusty feels it too. My old yellow lab used to sleep through anything, but now he wakes up growling at the darkness. He won't go near the mine entrances anymore. Stands at the edge, hackles raised, and whines like he's begging me not to go in either. I should listen to him, but I need to check the shafts, map them out, see what's worth digging and what's not. Yesterday, I found something strange. About 100 yards from the cabin, there was a perfect ring of bones. Small ones, mice, rabbits, birds, all laid out like someone used a compass to place them. No animal does that. And no person has been out here but me. Desert wind, I told myself, just blew them that way by chance. But this morning, the bones were in a different pattern. A square. I kicked them apart, scattered them all over. Then, I went down to the main shaft to check my equipment. That's when I heard the voices again. Dan, ... We're down here. Dan, ... It was Mike's voice. Mike, who was always first in line for overtime. Mike, who had 3 kids and a wife who packed him the best lunches. We're trapped. Dan, help us, ... double quotes. Then I heard Carlos and Tomas and all the rest of them calling from deep in the darkness. I ran down the shaft with my flashlight, heart pounding, calling their names. The beam bounced off the old support beams, the walls, the ceiling that seemed lower than I remembered. No one was there, just dust and darkness and the drip of water somewhere deep below. When I got back to the surface, I was shaking. I opened my emergency bottle of whiskey and drank until the voices in my head quieted down. It's just guilt, I told Rusty as he laid his head on my knee. Just my brain playing tricks, but it feels so real, and I'm starting to lose track of time. Yesterday I started working at sunrise, and the next thing I knew, it was dark. My watch said I'd been working for 14 hours, but I have no memory of most of it. My notebook had entries I don't remember writing. Checked North Tunnel. Something moving in the dark. They're rearranging themselves when I'm not looking. The walls are breathing. That's not my handwriting. It can't be. Last night, I dreamed. I was buried alive. Could feel the dirt filling my mouth, my nose, my lungs. Woke up gasping, covered in sweat, even though it was freezing cold. Rusty wasn't in the cabin. I called for him all morning, whistled until my lips were dry and cracked. He's never run off before. Never. The sun is setting now. The generator just died, right on schedule. I'm writing this by lantern light. They're scratching at the door. Soft at first, then harder. It's probably Rusty. Has to be Rusty. I'm going to let him in now. It wasn't Rusty at the door. Nothing was there when I opened it. Just the cold night air and the endless stars above. I called for him until my voice gave out, then fell into a troubled sleep. 3 days later, I found what was left of him. I was checking the western edge of the claim, an area I hadn't explored much. There, arranged neatly on a flat rock like some kind of sick display, was Rusty's skeleton. Clean, white, not a scrap of fur or flesh left, just bones, positioned exactly like he was lying down for a nap. No animal could do that. No animal could strip a body so clean, then arrange it so ... Carefully, I buried him there. Couldn't bring myself to touch the bones. He used my shovel to scoop him into the ground, then piled rocks on top so nothing could dig him up. When I got back to the cabin, I threw up until there was nothing left but bile. Then I packed my truck. Time to leave this place. But the truck wouldn't start. Battery dead. Solar panels not charging it. I tried everything I know, and I know engines. Nothing worked. The radio's dead too. Cell phone has no signal. I'm stuck here. That night, the temperature dropped so low that water froze. In the pipes, I huddled under every blanket I had, listening to sounds I couldn't explain. Scraping, clicking, like bones tapping against each other in the darkness. When morning came, I forced myself to check the mine again. Had to be practical. The nearest town is 40 miles away. I need the truck working, or I need to find enough gold to make this whole nightmare worth it. The main shaft felt different, colder. The support beams groaned under the weight of the earth above. My headlamp caught something reflective, a gold vein I hadn't noticed before. It led deeper, around a bend I didn't remember. I followed it. The shaft got narrower, the air stiller. Then my light hit something white against the dark rock. Bones. Human bones. Half buried in the wall, like they'd been there for years. But as I got closer, I recognized the old blue bandana still knotted around what used to be a neck. Mike. It was Mike's bandana, the one his daughter made him for Father's Day. I stumbled backward, the beam of my headlamp dancing wildly across the walls. More bones, more familiar items. Carlos's St. Christopher medal, Tomas's wedding ring. All my crew, embedded in the walls of a mine they'd never set foot in. That's not possible. They died 200 miles from here. Different mine, different company. I ran, hitting my head on a low beam but not slowing down until I reached daylight. Blood ran down my face from the cut on my forehead. The sun was already setting. How long was I down there? My watch said 4:30 p.m., but it had been morning when I entered. Back at the cabin, I found more bone arrangements. Circles, squares, triangles now, right outside my door, moving closer. I've lost 3 days this week. Just gone. I find myself in places with no memory of walking there. Yesterday I woke up at the bottom of a shaft I'd never seen before. My hands raw from digging without tools. My journal is filling with entries I don't remember writing. It collects them, arranges them, learns from them. The dead speak through bone. It's coming up from below. I hear them moving at night. Last night I heard coyotes circling the cabin. When I shined my flashlight out the window, their eyes glowed in the darkness. Dozens of them, just watching, waiting, and at their feet of small bones. Offerings this morning. I followed footprints in the sand. My footprints, leading to a part of the claim I'd never visited. There I found a rock wall covered in ancient paintings. Pictures of a tall skeletal figure standing among smaller human shapes. The humans were bowing, bringing it bones. The paintings showed the creature coming up from under the earth, reaching with long bone fingers to take the dead. As I stared at those images, I felt the ground shift under my feet, just slightly, like something massive was moving deep below. I need to get out of here, but I also need to know what happened to my crew. If their remains are really here, somehow, I need to know why. The generator just died again, right on time, and the scratching at the door has started. It's not Rusty this time either. I didn't open the door last night. The scratching continued for hours, getting louder, more desperate. Around 3 a.m., it stopped. In the morning, I found bone dust on the doorstep, like something had been grinding itself against the wood. I need to face facts. Either I'm losing my mind, or something impossible is happening in this desert. Maybe both. Today I went back to the rock wall with the paintings. In the daylight, I noticed more details. The skeletal figure wasn't just standing among the humans, it was made of them. countless tiny human bones forming one giant creature. Below the paintings were symbols carved into the rock. Not in English, but somehow I could understand them. The bone collector, guardian of the dead, feeds on guilt. That last part hit me hard. Guilt is something I have plenty of. I traced the symbols with my fingers, and suddenly my head was filled with visions. The history of this place flashed before my eyes like a movie playing too fast. Native tribes avoiding this valley for centuries. Spanish explorers disappearing. The first miners finding rich gold veins, then vanishing one by one. All taken by the thing that lives below. The thing that gathers bones and uses them to build itself. The thing that feeds on the guilt of those who disturb its territory. When the vision cleared, the sun was setting. Another day gone in what felt like minutes. I ran back to the cabin, grabbed my flashlight, and headed to the main shaft. I needed to see my crew again. Needed to know if they were really there or if I had imagined it. The shaft seemed deeper than before. The walls narrower. I had to crouch, then crawl. The beam of my flashlight caught movement ahead, something white shifting in the darkness. I froze. The movement stopped. Who's there? My voice echoed back. To me, strange and distorted. We're all here. Dan, it was Mike's voice. But wrong. Hollow. You left us behind. That wasn't here, I said. You died at the Silver Peak mine, 200 miles from here. The collector brought us here. It brings all the forgotten ones here. I inched forward, the light revealing what I'd seen before, bones embedded in the wall. But now they were moving, skulls turning to look at me, finger bones twitching. What is this place? I whispered. It's feeding ground. Carlos's voice now, coming from a skull half buried in the rock. It's ancient, patient. It waits for those heavy with guilt, then feeds for years, decades. We weren't killed in a cave-in, Dan, said Tomas. We were taken while you were checking the upper level. It pulled us down into the deep places. I backed away, heart hammering. That's not possible. I saw the collapse. I tried to dig you out. You saw what it wanted you to see. Mike again. It needs guilt. To feed your guilt has been sustaining it for 2 years, bringing it strength. Something moved behind me. I spun around, the beam of my light catching a glimpse of what looked like a hand made of smaller bones, disappearing around a corner. I ran, scrambling upward, toward the entrance. The shaft seemed to shift around me, narrowing, trying to keep me inside. Rocks fell from the ceiling, barely missing me. When I finally burst out into the night air, the stars were spinning overhead. I fell to my knees, gasping. Back at the cabin, I found my journal open to a new entry, written in what looked like my handwriting but wasn't. The bone collector has been here since the earth was young. It guards the boundary between living and dead, takes those who disturb the ground, keeps their bones, uses them. There is no escape, only acceptance. Below this was a crude drawing of the mine shafts, not as they are now, but as they were thousands of years ago. Natural caves, stretching deep into the earth, and at the bottom, a chamber marked with a symbol that matched one on the rock wall, the home of the bone collector. I understand now. This thing, whatever it is, has been feeding on my guilt, using it to grow stronger, using it to bring my crew here, either really or in some phantom form that's solid enough to touch. And it won't stop until it has my bones too, unless I stop it first. I'm a mining engineer. I know how to bring down a shaft, how to collapse a tunnel, how to bury something so deep it never sees daylight again. I still have dynamite in the shed, blasting caps, everything I need. Tomorrow, I'm going down to find this thing, to end this. If anyone finds this journal, well, I'm sorry for what I did. To my crew, to their families, I'll try to make it right. The scratching at the door has started again, louder now, more insistent. I think it knows what I'm planning. Dawn broke with an unnatural silence. No wind, no birds, nothing but the sound of my own breathing as I prepared. I laid everything out on the cabin table. 6 sticks of dynamite, blasting caps, wire, my old detonator, enough to bring down the main shaft and seal whatever lives down there. My hands shook as I worked. The arthritis that's been bothering me for years seemed worse today, like the desert had sucked all the moisture from my joints. Or maybe it was fear. I wrote one last entry in my journal, explaining everything. Not that anyone would believe it. Then I loaded the explosives into my backpack and headed for the mine. The bone arrangements were everywhere now, hundreds of them. Circles, squares, stars, all pointing toward the main shaft like arrows. guiding me in or warning me away. At the entrance, I hesitated. The darkness seemed to breathe, pulsing like a living thing. I switched on my headlamp and took the first step down. The air got colder as I descended. My light caught movement in the shadows, quick, skittering things that vanished when I looked directly at them. Small bones, moving on their own. I reached the spot where I'd seen my crew. The wall was empty now. No bones, no sign they'd ever been there. But deeper in the shaft, I heard voices, whispering, calling, "Dan, come join us, Dan, .. I kept going. The shaft narrowed until I had to crouch, then widened suddenly into a cavern I'd never seen before. My light couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls, but it did catch something in the center. A pile of bones, not arranged in patterns, but heaped together like a nest. Human bones, animal bones, ancient bones turned yellow with age, fresh ones still gleaming white, and the pile was moving, shifting, rebuilding itself before my eyes. It rose up, taking shape, bones knitting together, clicking and scraping, small animal skulls forming fingers on hands made of human arm bones, a spine made of countless tiny vertebrae from snakes and lizards, and at the top, a head, a massive thing cobbled together from human and animal skulls, with empty eye sockets that somehow still saw me. 12 feet tall, a skeleton made of skeletons. The bone collector. I should have run, should have detonated the explosives right there, but I couldn't move. Those empty eyes held me in place as surely as chains. Daniel Cortez. Its voice wasn't sound but thought, pushing into my head. You who carry the weight of 8 souls, I came to end this, I said, my own voice small in the vastness of the cavern. The creature tilted its patchwork head. Nothing ends. Bones remain. Guilt remains. Where are they, my crew? Are they really here? The creature raised one massive arm, pointing to the heap of bones it had risen from. Here, there, everywhere. Part of me now, as you will be. From the pile emerged smaller figures. 8 of them, skeletons walking on their own, each wearing something I recognized. Mike's bandana, Carlos's medal, my crew, or what was left of them. You abandoned us, they said in unison. Left us to die. No, I whispered. I tried to save you. I tried to dig you out. The bone collector leaned down, its face of skulls inches from mine. Your guilt called to me across the desert, drew me to your dreams. I followed it here, bringing them with me, to show you the truth. What truth? That you wanted them to die. The words hit me like a physical blow. No, that's not true. Deep down, you resented them, their youth, their futures, their families, all the things you lost. You were careless with those support beams because part of you wanted the collapse. No, I screamed, finally breaking free of its hold. I stumbled backward, reaching for my backpack. You're lying. But what if it wasn't? What if that dark thought had been hiding inside me all along? The real reason I'd been so careless. The creature seemed to grow larger, feeding on my doubt, my self-hatred. The skeletons of my crew moved closer. I had a choice. Believe this thing and let it consume me, or reject its lies and fight back. I thought of my crew, the real men, not these bone puppets. Mike, who shared his lunch with me. Carlos, who named his son after me. Tomas, who saved my life once when a tunnel flooded. I hadn't wanted them to die. I'd loved them like brothers. You're wrong, I said, my voice stronger. Now, it was an accident. A terrible accident that I'll regret forever. But I didn't want it to happen. The creature hissed, seeming to shrink slightly. The bone puppets faltered. That's when I understood. It didn't feed on guilt, it fed on self-hatred, on the belief that we deserve punishment, and I'd been feeding it for 2 years. I'm sorry, I said to the bone puppets of my crew. I'm so sorry it happened, but I didn't want it, and I won't let this thing use you anymore. I pulled out the dynamite, quickly setting it around the base of the cavern where the walls looked weakest. The bone collector roared a sound like an avalanche and lunged for me. I dodged old joints protesting and scrambled toward the exit. Bony hands grabbed at my legs, my arms. Small skeletons of rats and rabbits swarmed over me, trying to drag me back. I kicked free, running up the shaft, unreeling wire as I went. Behind me, the creature was coming. I could hear it tearing through the narrower parts of the tunnel, widening them with brute force. Daylight ahead. Just a few more steps. I burst out of the mine, gasping, and connected the wire to my detonator. The ground trembled as the bone Collector neared the entrance, one push. That's all it would take. But as my thumb hovered over the button, I realized the truth. This thing was part of the desert, ancient, patient. It had survived cave-ins before, and it was connected to my crew now. If I wanted to destroy it for good, I'd have to collapse the entire network of caves beneath the claim. That meant detonating from inside, from the main cavern itself. No chance of escape, but a chance for redemption. I looked around at the desert one last time. The endless blue sky, the Joshua trees standing like sentinels. This harsh, beautiful place that had become my confession booth. Then I turned and walked back into the darkness, detonator in hand. The bone collector waited, just inside, blocking the path. "You cannot destroy me," it said. "I am eternal." "Maybe," I replied, "but I can bury you. By the next person sometime." I ducked under its massive arm and ran back down the shaft. It followed, but slower now, cautious. It knew what I was planning. In the main cavern, I stood among the piles of bones among my crew and raised the detonator. "I forgive myself," I said. "To the creature, to my crew, to myself, and I'm not afraid anymore." The bone collector screamed, lunging toward me. I pushed the button. The world turned white, then black. "My name is Rebecca Torres, and I've been hiding in this godforsaken valley for 2 years now. I came here because no one else would. The locals call it the Howling Valley, and they avoid it like the plague. That's exactly why I chose it. I was 29 when I escaped the family of Divine Light. That's what they called themselves. Anyway, just another doomsday cult that promised salvation but delivered control and fear. When I tried to leave with my younger sister, they were let's just say I'm the only one who made it out alive. The bullet in my shoulder reminds me of that every time it rains. This valley tucked deep in the Appalachians of West Virginia seemed perfect. No roads lead here anymore, just overgrown logging, paths that even the most determined hiker avoids. The mountains rise so steep on all sides that sunlight only touches the valley floor for a few hours each day. The rest of the time, it's like living in permanent twilight. Everything here is damp. My clothes never fully dry. Mushrooms grow on my boots if I don't move them for a day. The abandoned coal mines leak black water that smells like rotten eggs. Sometimes I explore the ghost towns where miners once lived, stealing anything useful from cabinets that haven't been opened in decades. Food is hard to come by. I set snares for rabbits and squirrels. I know which berries won't kill me and which mushrooms are safe. Sometimes I hike 8 miles to an abandoned farm to steal canned goods from the root cellar. The family left in a hurry, dishes still on the table, clothes still in the closets. I try not to think about why. The wildlife here isn't right. The bears are too big, the coyotes too bold. Just last week, I watched 5 wolves working together to bring down a deer. They didn't fight over the meat like normal wolves. They took turns, they waited, they shared. The sounds here play tricks on you. Sometimes a whisper from the far end of the valley sounds like it's right behind you. Other times, a scream right next to you fades away like it's miles distant. And then there are the moments when everything goes completely silent. Not even the leaves rustle. It's like the whole forest is holding its breath, listening for something. I've found old stone circles in the deepest parts of the woods. Native American maybe, or something older. There are unmarked graves, too. Simple wooden crosses rotted almost to nothing. I counted 27 before I stopped looking for them. The locals have stories about this place. Families who came here and vanished. Hunters who went in and never came out. Even the logging companies pulled out in the 70s after too many accidents. I thought I was running from people, from the cult, from anyone they might send after me. I was wrong. There are worse things than humans in this valley, and I think they've noticed me. Last night, as I huddled in my makeshift shelter on old mining office I've reinforced with scrap metal and fallen logs, I heard it again. The howling, not like wolves or coyotes. Something ... different. Something that understands words. Something that knows my name. I don't sleep much anymore. Can't afford to. Every night, I load my grandmother's silver jewelry melted down into crude bullets into my pistol and wait. They're getting closer, and I'm running out of places to hide. It started with small things. Things I could explain away. My snares would be broken, but not sprung. At first, I thought it was just bad luck or sloppy work on my part. Then I noticed a pattern. The traps closest to my shelter were always the ones tampered with. The ones farther away were left alone, like something was sending me a message. I started marking my territory with little signs only I would recognize: a bent twig here, a stack of 3 stones there, my own personal trail markers. But someone, or something, was messing with them, moving them just enough that I'd notice. One morning, I found all my stone stacks arranged in a perfect circle round the tree where I'd hung my food bag. Just bears, I told myself. Maybe some locals messing with me. But I knew better. The cult wouldn't be this patient. They'd have stormed in with guns if they'd found me. The howling kept getting worse. Most nights now, I hear them. Not regular wolf howls, but something that sounds almost like talking. One howls, then stops. Another answers from a different direction, then another. They're talking to each other, coordinating. I've started mapping where the sounds come from. They're forming a circle around me, and that circle is getting smaller. I smell them sometimes. A wet dog smell, but wrong somehow. Muskier, heavier. I'll be gathering firewood, and suddenly the smell hits me, but there's nothing there. Just tracks that circle my shelter, huge paw prints, but sometimes they look almost like bare feet. Last week, I found a deer carcass just 50 yards from my door. It wasn't torn apart like normal predator kills. It was arranged. The legs were neatly severed, placed in a row. The organs were piled beside it, untouched. The head was missing. I burned the whole thing and moved my shelter that same day. I've started keeping a strict schedule. Wake at dawn. Check the perimeter. Gather water. Check snares. Forage, return before dark. Secure the shelter. Never break the routine, but they're learning my patterns. 3 days ago, I went to check my snares and found them all empty. On my way back, I passed the same spot and found a dead rabbit placed in the middle of the path. Its neck was broken, but not a drop of blood had been spilled. A gift, a threat. I left it there and took a different route home. I've started sleeping in trees, away from my shelter. I strapped myself to a high branch with my belt and tried to get a few hours of rest. Last night, I woke to the sound of sniffing at the base of my tree. When I looked down, I saw eyes reflecting the moonlight, at least 6 sets, all looking up at me. They didn't move when I shined my flashlight. They just watched. When I threw a branch at them, they melted back into the darkness without a sound. The valley feels smaller now. Paths I've used for months suddenly end in fallen trees or rock slides. The creek I get water from changed course overnight after a storm. At least, that's what I told myself until I found the dam made of rocks and branches. No beaver built that. The rocks were stacked too neatly, too purposefully. I've started having the same dream every night. I'm running through the forest, but the trees keep moving. Every path leads back to the same clearing. In the middle stands a large black dog. No, not a dog. Something taller, something with hands. I always wake up before I see its face, my heart pounding so hard it hurts. Yesterday, I found my own knife stuck in a tree outside my shelter. I hadn't lost it. It had been in my pack all day. But there it was, the blade buried deep in the bark at exactly my eye level. Beneath it was a crude drawing scratched into the tree, a stick figure running from 4-legged shapes. I'm not imagining this. I'm not crazy. Something in this valley is hunting me. Something smart, something patient. And I think it's done waiting. I found the hiker's backpack first, torn and empty by the creek. Then his boot, still laced up tight with no foot inside. Then pieces of him, an arm here, part of a leg there scattered across half a mile like breadcrumbs. The bones weren't just broken, they were cracked open, like something wanted the marrow. That's when I knew I wasn't alone in being hunted. I took his map and compass, the only useful things left. The map showed hiking trails that don't exist anymore. At least, not that I can find. When I tried to follow them out of the valley, I ended up walking in circles, always coming back to the same lightning-struck oak tree. It was like the valley itself wouldn't let me leave. The howling doesn't just happen at night now. Sometimes I hear it in broad daylight, echoing across the valley. It sounds almost like laughter. 2 nights ago, I woke to scratching at my door. Not frantic animal scratching, but slow and deliberate. 3 scratches. Pause. 3 scratches. Pause, like knocking. I grabbed my gun and waited, barely breathing. The scratching moved around the entire shelter, testing every wall, every weak spot. I counted at least 3 different sets of claws. Go away. I finally shouted, my voice cracking from disuse. Everything went silent. Then something heavy landed on the roof. Slow footsteps crossed above me, too slow, too careful to be an animal. The whole shelter creaked under the weight. I fired a shot through the roof and heard a yelp, then heavy thuds as whatever it was jumped down and ran off. In the morning, I found blood on the ground, dark, almost black, but no tracks leading away, just a smear where something had carefully wiped the blood away. That same day, I hiked to the abandoned farm again for supplies. The root cellar door was torn off its hinges. Inside, all the food was gone. On the wall, scratched deep into the concrete, was a crude drawing of a stick figure in a box, me in my shelter. Around it were 5 shapes like dogs standing on 2 legs. I nearly ran back to my shelter, only to find it surrounded, not by people or animals I could name, but by shadows, just glimpses between tree stall, shaggy shapes that ducked away whenever I looked directly at them. They herded me like a sheep, blocking certain paths, leaving others open. I was being guided back to my shelter. I had no choice. Night was falling. That night, I barricaded myself inside and took stock of my supplies. 6 silver bullets left, a knife, 3 days of food, a bottle of whiskey I'd been saving. I drank half of it to steady my nerves. They circled all night, making those sounds not quite howling, not quite talking. When I shined my flashlight through the cracks in the walls, I caught glimpses of fur, of teeth, of eyes that reflected the light, like a deer's but blinked like a person's. Around midnight, I heard a new sound, digging. They were trying to get under the shelter. I spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner, gun in hand, listening to the scratch of claws in the dirt beneath the floorboards. Every few minutes, I'd stamp my foot or bang the floor with the whiskey bottle, and the digging would stop. Then it would start again somewhere else. As dawn broke, everything went quiet. I waited an hour, then carefully opened my door. They had dug holes all around the shelter, a perfect circle of pits, just deep enough to trap a person's leg. A broken ankle out here would be a death sentence. They were getting smarter, more strategic. But the real shock came when I checked my hidden camera. I'd set it up weeks ago, an old trail cam, aimed at the clearing in front of my shelter. Most of the pictures showed nothing, but one, taken just before dawn, made my blood freeze. Standing in the middle of the clearing was, I don't know what to call it. It stood upright like a man, but was covered in thick dark fur. Its face was stretched into something between a human face and a wolf's muzzle. Its hands, yes hands, not paws, had long fingers ending in claws. It was looking directly at the camera, head tilted like it was curious. Behind it stood 4 more shapes, less clear but similar. A pack. As I stared at the picture, I heard a single howl from the ridge above me. I looked up to see a large shape silhouetted against the morning sky. It raised what looked like an arm and pointed directly at me. Then it was gone, and the rest of the pack with it. They were done sending warnings. The real hunt was about to begin. I had to run. The shelter wasn't safe anymore. I grabbed only what I could carry: my gun, knife, water bottle, some jerky, and a small first aid kit. I left at noon when the sun was highest, hoping they might be less active. I was wrong. I'd barely made it half a mile when I heard them moving through the trees on both sides of me, not trying to hide anymore. Branches snapped, undergrowth rustled. They wanted me to know they were there. "Leave me alone," I shouted, pointing my gun at the sounds. Something laughed, a sound halfway between a human chuckle and a dog's bark. Then silence. I kept moving, heading for the steepest part of the valley wall. If I could get to higher ground, maybe I could see a way out. My shoulder throbbed, where the old bullet wound pulled with every step uphill. The path I'd used before was blocked by a wall of fallen trees, too many to be natural, too neatly placed. I had to find another way. As I turned around, I saw them clearly for the first time in daylight. 5 of them, spaced out in a half circle about 50 yards away. They walked on 2 legs but could drop to all 4s in an instant. Their bodies were covered in dark fur, black or deep brown. Their faces were the worst part, almost human eyes set in wolf-like heads, with jaws that looked strong enough to snap bone. The largest one stood in the center. It had grey streaks in its fur and a scar running down its chest. The alpha. It stared at me with eyes that knew too much, eyes that understood. I fired a warning shot into the air. They didn't even flinch. Instead, they spread out wider, moving to surround me. I ran, not up the valley wall anymore. That path was cut off. Just away from them, crashing through undergrowth, splashing through the creek, gasping for breath. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but fear kept me moving. They followed at an easy pace, not rushing, just keeping me in sight. Hurting me, I realized too late where they were driving me toward, the abandoned mine shaft. The ground grew soggy under my feet. The trees thinned out. Ahead loomed the collapsing entrance of the old coal mine, a dark mouth in the hillside, surrounded by rotting support beams. I skidded to a stop at the edge of the clearing. Behind me, the pack spread out in a line, blocking any escape. The Alpha stepped forward. It pointed at the mine entrance, then at me. The message was clear: go in or face us. The mine was a death trap and stable, probably flooded in parts, but facing 5 of those things in the open was certain death. I made a split-second decision. I fired directly at the Alpha, aiming for its chest. It dodged with shocking speed, but not quite fast enough. The silver bullet grazed its shoulder. It let out a howl of pain that shook the trees. The wound sizzled and smoked like I'd touched it with a hot iron. The pack hesitated, looking at their wounded leader. I used that moment to dive into the underbrush to my right, rolling down a short slope and landing in a dry creek bed. I ran along the creek bed, staying low. Behind me, angry howls split the air. They weren't playing anymore. Now they were out for blood. The creek bed led to a small waterfall. I climbed up beside it, the spray soaking my clothes. Something about the moving water seemed to confuse them. They lost my trail temporarily, howling in frustration. I found a small cave behind the waterfall and squeezed inside. It was barely big enough for me to sit up. I reloaded my gun with shaking hands and waited. Night fell. I could see their shapes moving on the other side of the waterfall, pacing back and forth. Occasionally one would approach, sniff the air, then back away, whining. The water masked my scent and confused them somehow. But I couldn't stay there forever. Around midnight, the Alpha appeared. Its wounded shoulder had stopped smoking, but was now a raw, open sore. It approached the waterfall slowly, cautiously. It reached out a clawed hand toward the water, then pulled back as if burned. That's when I understood. Silver hurt them. Running water blocked them. They had weaknesses. The Alpha locked eyes with me through the falling water. It nodded once, a completely human gesture, then backed away. It raised its head and let out a long, complex howl. The others answered from different points around the valley. They were calling for reinforcements. I waited until they moved away, then slipped out of the cave. My clothes were soaked and cold, but I didn't dare start a fire. I moved as quietly as I could, following the stream downhill. The valley had to end somewhere. All water flows to the ocean eventually. I just had to follow it far enough. Behind me, I heard them finding my trail again. Howls echoed from both sides, now more than 5 voices. The pack was growing. I had 5 silver bullets left, a knife, and the clothes on my back. Against me was a growing pack of creatures that shouldn't exist, in a valley that seemed to bend reality itself. Dawn was still hours away. I kept moving downhill, staying close to the water when I could. My only chance was to find a way out. Before they found me, then I saw the eyes reflecting in the darkness ahead of me, more of them, blocking my path. I was trapped between 2 groups. I raised my gun, aimed at the nearest pair of eyes, and prepared for the fight of my life. The eyes ahead weren't what I expected. They were too small, too close to the ground. A fox darted across my path, followed by 3 more. They ran like they were fleeing something worse than me. Animals know. They always know when something bad is coming. I followed their lead, moving faster now. The stream widened into a proper creek. The valley floor began to slope more steeply. Hope flared in my chest. Maybe I was finally nearing the valley's end. Behind me, the howling grew more frantic. They knew I was getting close to escaping. I rounded a bend and stopped dead. The creek disappeared into a large pipe buried in the hillside, an old mining drainage tunnel. It was barely big enough to crawl through, dark and rusted, but it had to lead somewhere. As I hesitated, a howl sounded right behind me, too close. I spun around to see the Alpha standing on a rock, not 20 feet away. In the moonlight, I could see its face clearly now. The muzzle was shorter than a wolf's, the eyes more forward-facing, almost human eyes in an almost wolf face. The worst of both. Behind it, at least 10 more shapes moved in the shadows. The pack had doubled in size. The Alpha growled a sound that formed itself into something almost like words. Ours, valley, ours. I aimed my gun at its head. Let me leave, and you'll never see me again. It tilted its head, considering. Then it smiled, a horrifying sight. Too many teeth in a mouth not meant for smiling. Torres. It mangled my name, but I understood it. Rebecca Torres. Ice flooded my veins. How do you know my name? It took a step closer. Family. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the gun. What do you mean, family? Instead of answering, it reached into a pouch made of skin hanging at its side. It pulled out something small and glinting, my sister's necklace, the one she was wearing the night the cult caught us. No, I whispered. That's not possible. The alpha dropped to all fours and began to change. Its fur seemed to sink into its skin. Its muzzle flattened. The transformation wasn't quick or pretty, bones cracked, skin stretched. I nearly threw up watching it. Where the alpha had stood now, crouched a man, naked, scarred, his hair matted, but I recognized his face. Brother Matthew, the cult leader's right hand, the one who shot me as I ran. We found you, he said, his voice raspy from disuse. The divine light showed us the way, showed us what we could become, what you can become. You're insane, I said, my finger tightening on the trigger. Look at your hands, Rebecca. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help it. In the moonlight, I saw dark hair growing on the backs of my hands, hair that hadn't been there before. My nails looked longer, thicker. How long do you think you've been in this valley? He asked. 2 years, I answered automatically. He laughed. 5 years, Rebecca, 5 years. You lose time when the change begins. You hunt without remembering. You run on 4 legs, but wake on 2. No, I shook my head. You're lying. The divine light chooses who transforms and who serves as food. You were chosen, Rebecca. Your sister wasn't. Rage boiled up inside me. I fired, the silver bullet hitting him square in the chest. He screamed a sound that turned from human to wolf as he fell backward. The pack surged forward. I turned and dove into the drainage pipe, dragging myself forward on my elbows. Water soaked my clothes as I crawled through the darkness. Behind me, I heard them trying to follow. Claws scraping on metal, growls echoing in the confined space. The pipe seemed endless. My elbows and knees were raw from scraping against the rusty surface. Water rose higher as I went deeper, soon reaching my chin. I had to tilt my head back to breathe. Just as I thought I might drown, the pipe ended, dumping me out onto a rocky stream. I gasped for air and looked around. I was outside the valley, on the other side of the mountain. I'd escaped. Dawn was breaking. I dragged myself to my feet and staggered downstream, putting as much distance between myself and that pipe as possible. By noon, I found a hiking trail. By evening, a ranger station. I told them I was a lost hiker. They gave me food, dry clothes, and a ride to the nearest town. I should have felt safe. I had escaped the valley and the pack, but something wasn't right. In the bathroom of the ranger station, I got my first good look at myself in 5 years. My hair was streaked with gray. My face was leaner, harder. My teeth, when I bared them at my reflection, seemed sharper. And my eyes, they reflected the light like an animal's. I left town that night. I couldn't risk staying around people. Not until I understood what was happening to me. Not until I knew if what Brother Matthew said was true. It's been 3 months since I escaped the valley. I live in the wilderness still, but far from West Virginia. I keep moving. I avoid people. The dreams are getting worse. Dreams of running on all fours. Dreams of hunting. Dreams of the pack calling me home. Last night, I woke to find myself standing naked in the woods, miles from my camp, with blood on my hands and no memory of how I got there. A dead deer lay at my feet, its throat torn out. I don't know how much time I have left before the change takes me completely. I don't know if I can fight it. All I know is that I can't go back to that valley, because the worst part of the part that terrifies me more than the changes to my body is that sometimes, when the moon is high and the night is quiet, I find myself missing it, missing the pack, missing the hunt. Sometimes I catch myself listening for their howls. Sometimes I want to answer, I am Rebecca Torres, for now, but I don't know who or what I'll be when the next full moon rises, and the valley is calling me home. My name is James Whitmore. I'm 41 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was a detective with the Detroit Police Department. Now I'm nobody, hiding in the Florida Everglades, hoping the people who killed my partner don't find me. I've been at this old hunting lodge for 3 weeks now. It sits on wooden stilts above the murky water, reachable only by boat. The nearest neighbor is over 50 miles away, which is exactly what I needed. The walls are rotting from the constant humidity. and I've had to patch the roof twice already. But it keeps me dry when it rains, which is almost every afternoon. The Everglades stretch out forever in every direction, an endless maze of water paths, cypress trees, and tall saltgrass. During the day, the air is so thick with moisture, it feels like you're breathing through a wet towel. My clothes never fully dry, and the pages of my journal stay damp no matter where I keep them. I came here to hide, but sometimes I wonder if I've made a terrible mistake. The wildlife here seems off. Yesterday, I saw 3 alligators watching me from the water. As I fixed my boat, they didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. The water moccasins seem to find their way onto my porch no matter how many times I clear them off. Even the birds seem angry, screeching at me whenever I venture out. Finding my way around is nearly impossible. The waterways change daily with the tides. What was a clear path yesterday becomes a dead end today. I've started marking trees with red paint, but sometimes I swear the marks move overnight. I got lost for 6 hours on Tuesday, circling what I thought was the same patch of swamp until the sun began to set. There's something ancient about this place. Last week, I found what looked like cave paintings on a limestone outcropping, crude figures of men being swallowed by the water. Native American burial grounds are scattered throughout the region. The fishing guide told me to stay clear of them. Bad juju, he said, tapping his head knowingly. Speaking of sounds, this place plays tricks on you. Sometimes voices carry for miles, clear as if someone is standing right behind you. Other times, the silence is so complete it hurts your ears. Last night, everything went quiet all at once. The insects, the frogs, the nightbirds, silent for nearly 10 minutes. I held my breath the whole time, gun in hand, waiting for something. They say this area is cursed. The fishing guide, old man named Harley, who brings me supplies once a week, told me about the disappearances. Tourists, drug runners, even local guides who knew the waters. The swamp takes what it wants, he said with a shrug. Been happening since before my granddaddy was born. I didn't come here believing in curses or ghosts. I came here because no one would look for a Detroit cop in the middle of the Florida swamps. Because the men who killed my partner, my own corrupt colleagues, wouldn't think to search here. I came with my gun, my nightmares, and a bottle of whiskey to keep both at bay. What I didn't know then was that human killers would soon be the least of my worries. Harley was supposed to come with supplies yesterday. He never showed up. After waiting all day, I took my small boat out to check the main channel where we usually meet. The sun was getting low, painting the water orange and red. That's when I found his boat engine still running, slowly circling a cypress knee. Nobody inside. His fishing hat was floating next to it. I called his name until my voice gave out. Nothing but the echo of my own voice bouncing back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every splash outside made me jump. Around midnight, I heard someone calling my name from the water. It sounded just like Harley. James, help me. I'm stuck. I grabbed my flashlight and gun and ran to the porch. The voice came, again, closer now, but I couldn't see anyone. The beam of my light showed only still water and hanging moss. James, down here. The voice was coming from directly below the lodge. I knelt down and shined the light into the dark water. For a split second, I thought I saw my own face looking back at me, not a reflection, but my face under the water, smiling up. I jerked back so fast I dropped my flashlight. It fell into the water with a splash and disappeared. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I dreamed it all. Stress, guilt, and whiskey, not a good mix. But then I found my flashlight on the porch, completely dry, as if someone had placed it there while I slept. Things got stranger after that. I'd tie up my boat at night and find it on the other side of the lodge in the morning. Food went missing. From my supplies, my compass stopped working. The needle just spun in circles. For days after Harley disappeared, I decided to go to the ranger station for help. I marked my path carefully, but somehow ended up going in circles. The swamp looked different. Channels that should have been there were gone, replaced by thick mud banks I'd never seen before. After hours of trying, I gave up and headed back. Somehow, I found the lodge easily, as if the swamp wanted me to return. That night I heard voices outside, people talking and laughing. One of them sounded exactly like Mike, my partner from Detroit. The partner who took 3 bullets meant for me when we uncovered the corruption ring. "Come on out, Jimmy," his voice called. "It's all good now," they confessed. "We won." I knew it couldn't be him. I'd watched him die. I'd held his hand in the ambulance, but the voice was perfect even. Used the nickname only he called me. I stayed inside, doors locked, gun in my lap. The voices continued for hours, switching between Mike, my ex-wife, Sarah, and my old captain. They knew things only those people could know, private jokes, secrets, conversations we'd had. In the morning, I found footprints in the mud around my lodge identical to my own boot prints. That's when I started keeping track of time in my journal, writing down everything that happened, when I slept, what I ate, because I was starting to lose chunks of time. I'd sit down to clean my gun at noon. Then suddenly it would be sunset with no memory of the hours in between. Even find notes in my journal that I didn't remember writing. Detailed entries about trips I'd taken into the swamp, people I'd met, things I'd found, but I had no memory of any of it. One entry described finding a cave with bones arranged in a circle. Another talked about seeing my own face on a man walking into the water. My handwriting, but not my memories. I started having dreams too. Terrible. Dreams where I was hunting someone through the swamp. Only when I caught them, I'd discover I was hunting myself. I needed to get out. But every time I tried, the swamp led me back here. And I was starting to think something out there wanted to keep me here forever. I woke up yesterday morning to find bloody footprints leading from my bed to the door. My feet were clean, but the prints matched my size exactly. I followed them outside, down the rickety steps, and to the water's edge where they simply stopped. That's when I found the bodies. 3 of them, half submerged in the muddy water beneath my lodge. They were badly decomposed, their skin looking like it had been burned by acid. One was definitely Harley, still wearing his faded blue fishing vest with the hook patches. The others I didn't recognize, maybe tourists or hikers who wandered. Too far. I should have reported it right away. But who would I tell? And how would I explain that the bodies were arranged in a perfect circle, hands pointing toward the center like spokes on a wheel? Or that when I returned with my camera to document it, they were gone without a trace? The animals know something is wrong. I've noticed it more each day. Alligators that normally sun themselves near my dock have disappeared. Birds go silent and change direction when I walk under them. Yesterday, I found a ring of dead fish floating belly up around my boat, perfectly spaced as if placed there on purpose. Someone or something's watching me. I feel eyes on me constantly. Twice now, I've spotted a figure that looks just like me standing among the cypress trees, watching the lodge. When I call out or move toward it, it steps behind a tree and vanishes. Last night, I set up traps around the perimeter fishing line with cans attached that would make noise if anything crossed them. Around midnight, they all went off at once, cans clattering from every direction. I grabbed my gun and flashlight and ran outside. Nothing was there, but all my traps had been carefully dismantled, the lines coiled neatly and placed on my boat seat. I didn't sleep after that. As the sun came up, I decided to search the area. About a mile from the lodge, I found a small island with a limestone cave. Inside, the walls were covered with ancient drawing stick figures being pulled into the water by what looked like their own reflections. In the center of the cave was a pool of water so still it looked like glass, and floating in it were dozens of personal items, watches, wallets, rings, keys, things people wouldn't willingly part with. I recognized Harley's lucky fishing lure. Among them, as I stared into the pool, the water began to ripple. Though there was no wind, from its depths, I saw what looked like Mike's face, my dead partner staring up at me. But as I watched in horror, his features shifted and changed until I was looking at my own face. My reflection smiled when I didn't. I ran all the way back to the lodge, packed my essentials, and tried to leave. My boat engine died halfway down the channel. When I tried to start it again, I found the fuel line had been cut clean through. I had to paddle back as the sky darkened with storm clouds. That night brought the worst storm I'd seen yet. Lightning struck so close it shook the lodge on its stilts. Between thunderclaps, I heard voices calling from every direction. Mike, sometimes my ex-wife, sometimes my own voice. Let me in. Jimmy, Mike's voice called through the rain. I'm hurt. They found me. Please. I covered my ears, but the voices seemed to come from inside my head. The storm flooded parts of the swamp, changing the landscape yet again. When morning finally came, I found new channels had opened up, leading to places I'd never seen before. The water around my lodge had risen, now lapping at the floorboards, and written in the condensation on my window, From the inside were the words, "I am you now." I didn't write them. At least, I don't remember writing them. I've started to find cuts and scratches on my body that I can't explain. Mud on my boots. When I wake up, my gun moved from where I left it. What scares me most is the growing gaps in my memory. Yesterday, I lost 8 hours. According to my watch, I went to check my boat at 10 a.m. and suddenly it was 6 p.m. and I was standing in waist-deep water half a mile from the lodge with no memory of how I got there. In my pocket was a human tooth. I'm not alone in this swamp, but what's hunting me isn't human, and the terrifying thing is, I'm starting to think it's wearing my face. I barricaded myself in the lodge last night, pushing the heavy dresser against the door and boarding up the windows. I kept my gun close, though I wasn't sure it would help against whatever was out there. Sleep came in short, restless bursts. Each time I woke, something felt different about the rooms. More things moved, water dripping from places that had been dry, mud on the floor that wasn't there before. Around dawn, I heard a scratching at the door, not like an animal more, like a finger slowly dragging across the wood. When it stopped, I heard my own voice whisper through the crack, "James, let me in. It's getting cold out here." I stayed silent, gun aimed at the door. "I know you're awake," my voice continued from outside. "I know everything about you, how you let Mike die, how you ran instead of facing what you did." I covered my ears, but the voice seemed to come from everywhere now. "Did you ever wonder if maybe you're not the real James?" it asked. "Maybe I am, and you're just the copy." Something inside me snapped. I threw open the door, gun raised, but nothing was there. Just the grey morning light and mist rising from the water. That's when I saw a trail of wet footprints leading away from the lodge. My size, my pattern. Without thinking, I followed them. The tracks led me deep into a part of the swamp I'd never seen before. The trees grew thicker here, blocking out most of the sunlight. Spanish moss hung like grey curtains. The footprints continued right into a wall of dense reeds. As I pushed through, I found myself in a clearing. In the center stood a man with his back to me. He was my height, my build, wearing clothes identical to mine. "Stop right there," I said, raising my gun. Slowly, the figure turned around. It was like looking in a mirror, my face, my eyes, even the small scar above my right eyebrow. But his eyes were empty, like holes in a mask. "Hello, James," he said with my voice. "Finally ready to face yourself." I fired without thinking. The bullet hit him square in the chest. He looked down at the wound, then back at me and smiled. The bullet hole sealed itself like water rippling back together. I turned to run, but there was another me blocking the path, and another to my left and my right. 4 versions of myself surrounding me. "What are you?" I gasped. "I'm you," they all answered in unison. "The parts you try to hide. The guilt, the fear, the anger." The first one stepped closer. "We've been here for thousands of years, taking, becoming, learning." "We found your partner first," said another. "He came looking for you, so concerned." This one's face shifted slightly, features rearranging until Mike was staring at me. "He screamed your name at the end." I fired again and again until my gun clicked empty. The bullets passed through them like they were made of smoke, leaving rippling holes that closed immediately. I ran, crashed through the reeds and splashed through the shallow water, not caring which direction. Behind me, I heard them laughing my laugh, multiplied and distorted. I ran until my lungs burned, finally collapsing against a cypress tree. When I looked back, nothing was following me. But when I looked at my reflection in the water, I saw not one but 3 versions of my face staring back. I splashed the water, breaking the image, and kept moving. By some miracle, I found my way back to the lodge. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except for my journal open on the table. A new entry had been written in my handwriting. The more you run, the more pieces of yourself you leave behind. We collect them all. Soon there will be more of us than there is of you. Below it was a crude map, showing a path to what looked like a small island with a cave. X marks the spot, like a twisted treasure map. I knew it was a trap, but I also knew I couldn't keep running. Whatever these things were, these copies of me, they weren't going to stop. I gathered what supplies I could, my hunting knife, a homemade spear, matches, a bottle of kerosene I'd been saving for the lamp. As the sun began to set, I took my boat and followed the map. The water seemed to guide me, currents pushing my boat in the right direction, even when I tried to turn away. The island was small, just a hump of earth with a few trees and a dark opening in the rock face. From inside came a soft glow, like candlelight. I approached slowly, weapon ready. At the entrance, I stopped cold. The walls of the cave were covered with faces, not drawings, but actual faces pressing outward from the stone as if frozen there. Some were screaming, some looked peaceful. I recognized Harley among them, and in the center, sitting cross-legged, beside a pool of water, was Mike, my partner, just as I remembered him, down to the coffee stain on his shirt collar. "Jimmy," he said, looking up with a sad smile. "Took you long enough." "You're not Mike," I said, gripping my knife tighter. "He died in Detroit." "Did he?" Not Mike tilted his head. "Are you sure about that, Jimmy? Your memory hasn't exactly been reliable lately." He was right. The past weeks had become a blur of lost time and confusion. Had I really seen Mike die? I remembered blood, a hospital, but the details were foggy now. "What are you?" I asked. "We are the Mimic," he said. But now it wasn't just Mike's voice, it was many voices speaking together. "We've lived in these waters since before humans had names. We become what we touch. We learn, we absorb." As he spoke, his face rippled like disturbed water. For a second, I saw Harley's features, then a woman I didn't recognize, then my own face, before settling back into Mike's. "Why me?" I whispered. "Your guilt, your fear, your isolation, it makes you delicious." Mike's face smiled with too many teeth. "Broken people are easier to copy, easier to replace bit by bit. You've been feeding us pieces of yourself since you arrived." I looked at the faces in the walls. All these people, ... parts of us now. "As you will be." I lunged forward with my knife, but Mike, or whatever it was, moved like water, flowing around the blade. My momentum carried me forward, and I stumbled into the pool in the center of the cave. The water was ice cold and thick, like oil. As I struggled to stand, I felt something grab my ankle hands, pulling from below. I kicked free and scrambled backward. Standing now on the other side of the pool was ... me, a perfect copy, down to the mud on my boots and the cut on my hand from earlier. "You can't kill us, James," my copy said. "We're part of you now, and you're part of us," Mike added, moving to stand beside my doppelganger. More figures emerged from the shadows, all wearing my face but with subtle differences. One had darker eyes, another a crueler mouth. All the worst parts of me, separated and given form. I backed toward the cave entrance, but one of the mimics blocked the way. "There's nowhere to go," it said. "You've been hours since you found this place." A terrible thought struck me. How long have I been here? Really? They all smiled at once, a horrifying sight. "Longer than you think," said Mike. "The real question is, how much of the original James is even left?" I looked down at my hands, suddenly unsure. Was I really me, or had they already replaced? So much that I was more mimic than man. No, I couldn't think like that. I had to fight. I reached for the kerosene bottle in my pocket. The mimics saw it and hissed, backing away slightly. "Fire," I said, understanding dawning. "You don't like fire?" I unscrewed the cap and splashed kerosene toward them, then scrambled for my matches. The mimics moved toward me, their forms becoming less human, more fluid, like people made of dark water. My hands shook as I lit a match. The mimics lunged. I threw the lit match at the kerosene. The cave exploded in light and heat. The mimics screamed a sound like rushing water and breaking glass. Where the flames touched them, their human forms melted away, revealing something ancient and alien beneath, flowing darkness with too many eyes. I ran for the entrance, but my foot caught on a root. I fell hard, my head striking stone. The world spun, darkened. The last thing I saw was my own face looking down at me, flames reflecting in its eyes. I woke up in my boat, drifting in the main channel. The sun was rising. My clothes were dry. No burns, no signs of fire or struggle. Had it all been a dream, a hallucination from too much time alone? I made my way back to the lodge, each stroke of the paddle heavy with exhaustion and confusion. Everything was as I'd left it. My journal sat open on the table. I flipped through it, looking for answers, but the last entry was from weeks ago. All the pages I thought I'd filled were blank. I caught my reflection in the window glass. Something looked different about my eyes, but I couldn't place what. The radio crackled to life. The emergency channel I kept on, but that had been silent for weeks. "Attention all units," a voice said through static. "Be on lookout for James Whitmore." Wanted for questioning in the murder of Detective Michael Sawyer in Detroit. Suspect is armed and dangerous. I stared at the radio, something cold spreading through my chest. I hadn't killed Mike. The corrupt cops had, hadn't they? I noticed mud on the floor, a trail of wet footprints leading from the door to where I stood. My size, my pattern. Slowly, I turned back to the window. My reflection stared back, but when I raised my hand to touch my face, the reflection remained still. It smiled at me. "Who am I?" I whispered. My reflection's smile widened. Which one of us should answer that? Behind me, I heard the splash of something heavy entering the water. "My name is Maggie O'Sullivan. I came to the Olympic Peninsula to study plants, but really, I came here to hide. The rainforest is perfect for both. I still feel the ache in my ribs when I take deep breaths. The doctors said they're healing, but some breaks don't show up on x-rays." That's what I told myself about leaving Mark, too. Some breaks need time, space, and silence to heal properly. This place has silence in spades. The old logging camp I found is at least 10 miles from the nearest working road. The access path washed out 2 winters ago, and now the only way in or out is a muddy trail that disappears completely when it rains. Perfect for someone who doesn't want to be found. The forest here is ancient. The trees stretch so high I can barely see their tops, and the green is everywhere. Moss on stones, ferns carpeting the ground, vines climbing up trunks. Even the air feels green, thick with moisture that never quite becomes rain but never quite goes away either. My clothes haven't been completely dry since I arrived 3 weeks ago. I set up my research station in what used to be the foreman's cabin. The other buildings, the bunkhouses, the mess hall, the equipment shed, are all falling apart now. Nature is reclaiming them bit by bit. Sometimes at night, I hear wood creaking, metal rusting, the slow victory of time and weather over human things. The locals in the last town I passed through warned me about coming here. They mentioned the accident in '62, how an entire logging crew disappeared during a storm. Never found a single body, the gas station attendant told me. Forest just swallowed them up. I didn't tell him that disappearing sounded exactly like what I needed. My research on fungi gives me a good reason to be here. The Olympic Peninsula has some of the rarest mushroom species in North America, and no one has done a proper study of this particular area. At least that's what my grant proposal said. The university didn't need to know about Mark, or the restraining order, or the night I had to sleep in my office because I was afraid to go home. When I first arrived and unloaded my equipment, microscopes, specimen containers, field guides, and enough dried food to last months, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. The trees formed a wall between me and the world. The constant mist made it feel like I was wrapped in a cloud, invisible to everyone. That first night, I sat on the broken porch with a cup of tea, listening to the forest breathe. The air was so thick with life, I could almost taste it. For the first time in years, I didn't look over my shoulder once. I didn't know then that something in the forest was already looking at me. I settled into a simple routine after the first few days. Wake up at dawn, eat breakfast, check my specimens, then head out into the forest to collect more. I mapped the area around the camp with colored flags, red for dangerous spots like steep drops, blue for water sources, and yellow for places with the best mushrooms. Kaiser, my German shepherd, came with me everywhere. After what happened with Mark, I wasn't taking chances, even in the middle of nowhere. Kaiser was my early warning system, my protection, and my only friend out here. He seemed to love the forest as much as I did, racing through ferns and splashing in streams. But around the 2-week mark, things started to feel ... off. It was small at first. I'd leave my specimens arranged by type on my work table, but come back to find them rearranged, not scattered like an animal had been there, but placed in neat patterns I didn't recognize. I blamed it on tiredness, on forgetting what I'd done. Then my equipment started moving. I always put my knife on the left side of my plate at dinner, but would find it on the right. My compass would be in my backpack when I was sure I'd left it on the windowsill. "I'm just tired," I told Kaiser, who watched me with worried eyes. Living alone makes people weird, but Kaiser wasn't convinced. He started barking at nothing, staring into the trees with his ears perked up. At night, he would growl at the walls, the hair on his back standing straight up. One morning after a heavy rain, I found footprints in the mud near the water pump. They were huge, almost twice the size of my boots, and deep, like whatever made them was very heavy. They weren't bear tracks. I knew what those looked like. These were almost human, but not quite. Probably some hunter with big feet. I told Kaiser, but my voice shook a little. That same day, I saw handprints on my cabin window, 12 feet up. The window didn't even open, and there was nothing nearby to climb on. I started watching the trees more carefully. Sometimes they would sway when there wasn't any wind. Sometimes I'd catch a whiff of something musky, like wet fur, but Kaiser and I were alone for miles. At night, I began to lose track of time. I'd start working on my notes at sunset, then suddenly it would be midnight with pages of writing I didn't remember. Once I woke up by a stream over a mile from camp, with no memory of walking there. It's just stress, I whispered to myself. The isolation is getting to me. But Kaiser knew better. He stopped running ahead on our walks, staying close to my side instead. He whined when we were out too long and pulled me back toward the cabin. Before dark, then I started finding the gifts. A rare white mushroom I'd been searching for, placed directly in front of my door. A perfect circle of unusual stones on my work table. A branch with 3 types of moss I'd never seen before, laid across my pillow. Something was watching me, learning what I was looking for, and letting me know they were there. It's just other hikers, I told Kaiser, but we both knew no one else came this way. The night I heard breathing outside my window, deep, rhythmic breathing that couldn't belong to any animal I knew. I locked myself in the bathroom with Kaiser and my rifle until morning. I was no longer the observer in this forest. I had become the observed. Kaiser disappeared on a Tuesday morning. One minute he was sniffing around the edge of camp, and the next he was gone. No bark, no warning growl, just gone. I spent hours calling his name, my voice bouncing back at me from the endless trees. The mist was thick that day, cutting visibility to just a few yards ahead. I kept thinking I saw shapes moving just beyond where I could see clearly. Kaiser, come here, boy. My calls grew more desperate as the day wore on. Night in the forest was no place for a lost dog, even one as smart as Kaiser. By sunset, I had to go back to the cabin. My flashlight batteries were dying, and I was hopelessly turned around. It took me 3 hours to find my way back, following my yellow flags through the darkening woods. For 3 days, I searched. Each morning, I went out with fresh hope. Each night, I returned alone. On the 4th day, I found him. It wasn't an animal attack. Animals don't arrange their kills. Kaiser had been placed in a clearing, his body carefully positioned like he was sleeping, but he wasn't sleeping, and his bones, they were clean. Too clean, like something had taken great care with them. I buried him near the cabin, under a patch of wildflowers. I couldn't bear to examine him more closely. Whatever had done this wasn't a normal predator. That night, I slept with my rifle across my lap, jumping at every sound. A week passed. I should have left then, but the trail out was flooded from heavy rains. I was trapped until the waters receded. The feeling of being watched grew stronger every day. My research suffered because I couldn't focus. Every time I bent over a specimen, the hair on the back of my neck would rise, like someone was standing right behind me. Then came the deer. I found it hanging upside down from a tree branch, about a quarter mile from camp. It was still alive, its eyes wild with fear, but its legs were gone. Not torn off in the messy way of a predator, but removed with something like precision. Blood dripped slowly into a perfectly round depression in the earth below. I used my knife to end its suffering. I couldn't leave it like that. As I turned to go, I saw the arrangement of stones nearby. 7 large stones in a semicircle, with smaller ones placed between them. The same pattern I'd noticed with my rearranged specimens weeks ago. This wasn't random. This was communication. Back at the cabin, I started blocking the windows with blankets. I set up noise traps, tin cans on strings that would rattle if anything approached. I stopped going out at night completely. My dreams became strange. I'd see myself from above, as if something was watching me sleep. I'd wake up to find my blankets arranged differently, or my hair braided in ways I never wear it. One morning, I found my research journal open to a new page, filled with writing that looked like mine but wasn't. The symbols were unlike any language I'd ever seen, curved lines and dots that seemed to pulse when I looked at them too long. I started losing more time. I'd sit down for breakfast, and suddenly it would be afternoon. The sun would be in the wrong place in the sky, like the world had shifted while I wasn't looking. The trails I knew by heart started changing. A path that should lead to the Stream would suddenly end at a cliff face. Landmarks moved overnight. Once, my compass spun in complete circles, the needle whirling like it was dancing. I found myself talking out loud, explaining my research to the empty air, as if giving a lecture to invisible students. Sometimes, I could swear I heard responses in words, but in the rustling of leaves or the creaking of branches. "I'm losing my mind," I whispered to myself as I huddled in the cabin one night. But part of me knew that wasn't true. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being studied, just as carefully as I studied my fungi. Whatever was out there was learning about me, and it was getting closer every day. I didn't want to go deeper into the forest. Every instinct told me to stay in the cabin, to wait for the flooded trail to clear. But my water was running low, and I knew of a spring beyond the ridge that would be safer than the muddy stream nearby. I left at dawn, carrying my rifle and a backpack with emergency supplies. The mist hung between the trees like grey curtains. I felt eyes on me from every direction. About a mile from camp, I noticed something at a perfect line of fallen branches blocking my usual path. Not random windfall, but deliberately placed. I'd have to go around. The detour took me past a rocky outcrop I'd never explored before. A dark opening caught my eye. Not quite a cave, but a deep overhang in the stone. Something glinted inside. I should have walked away. Instead, I switched on my flashlight and went closer. The beam caught white shapes arranged in a semicircle. I thought they were stones at first. They weren't stones. They were skulls. Human skulls. 7 of them. My light trembled as I forced myself to look closer. Behind the skulls were more bones, ribs, femurs, vertebrae, arranged neatly like museum displays. Scraps of faded cloth still clung to some. A rusted watch, a belt buckle, the missing loggers. They'd been here all along, less than a mile from where I slept each night. But no animal would arrange bones like this. No animal would create the careful patterns of stones and sticks placed between the remains. This was deliberate. This was a collection. My flashlight beam caught something else on the rock wall behind the bones. At first, I thought it was moss or lichen patterns. Then I realized they were paintings. Crude, red-brown images stretched. Across the stone tall, shaggy figures with human-like hands standing beside much smaller human shapes. In some pictures, the humans were running. In others, they were lying down while the tall figures stood over them. The paint looked old in some places, fresh in others, like the images had been maintained and added to over time. A sound behind, me a stick breaking under heavy weight. I whirled around, rifle raised, but saw only mist and trees. Then the mist shifted, and I saw them. 3 figures stood at the edge of the clearing. The largest was enormous, at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark reddish-brown fur. Beside it was a slightly smaller one with lighter fur, and between them, half hidden, was a smaller figure, maybe 5 feet tall. They were too far away to see clearly, their features hidden by distance and mist, but I could feel them watching me, studying me, the way I'd study fungi under my microscope. I didn't fire. I couldn't move. For what felt like hours, we just stared at each other across the clearing. Then the smallest one took a step forward. The larger one made a sound, not quite a growl, not quite speech, and put a massive hand on the small one's shoulder. I backed away slowly, keeping my rifle pointed in their direction. When I reached the trees, I turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth, no longer caring about being quiet. I ran until my lungs burned, until the stitches in my barely healed ribs felt like fire. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, I had no idea where I was. It took me until sunset to find my way back to the cabin. The whole time, I felt them, following at a distance, watching, learning how I navigated, how I found my way. They were Sasquatch. The legends were real, and they had been watching me from the moment I arrived. That night, as I barricaded myself in the cabin, I heard them, moving around outside, heavy footsteps, circling slowly, breathing at the windows, gentle tapping on the walls, like they were testing for weak spots. I realized a terrible truth. I wasn't the first researcher in these woods. I was just the latest specimen in their collection. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. I sat with my back against the wall, rifle across my knees, listening to them move around the cabin. Sometimes they'd scratch at the door. Sometimes they'd mimic Kaiser's bark, as if trying to trick me into opening up. I needed a plan. The trail out would be dry enough to travel in a few days, but I wasn't sure I had that long. My food was running low, and I'd have to leave the cabin eventually. My botany training gave me an idea. I spent the next day gathering plants I knew were toxic, not deadly, but enough to make someone sick. I crushed them into a paste and smeared it around the outside of my windows and door when the creatures were quiet during midday. At least, it might keep them from touching those areas. I set up more warning system strings with bells attached, stretched between trees at ankle height. A circle of nails, points up, hidden under leaves around the porch steps. I poured my only bottle of whiskey, brought 4 emergencies in a ring around the cabin. Something told me they wouldn't like the smell. On the 3rd day, I saw the juvenile again. It was alone, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching the cabin with what looked like curiosity. In the daylight, I could see it better than the adults, with lighter fur and an almost childlike posture. It seemed less threatening somehow. It approached one of my specimen tables that I'd left outside and began touching the fungi samples, mimicking the way I'd sort them. It was learning from me. For a moment, I felt a strange connection to the creature. It was just curious, maybe even friendly. Then I remembered Kaiser's bones, arranged so carefully. The deer, still alive, but taken apart like a science experiment. The human remains in the cave. This wasn't friendship. This was research. I was the lab rat in their experiment. When the juvenile picked up my field journal and began flipping pages, something snapped inside me. That journal contained everything: my research, yes, but also my private thoughts, my fears about Mark finding me, my plans for the future. I raised my rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The juvenile dropped the journal and froze, looking at me with eyes that suddenly seemed too human. It made a sound, a high-pitched call that echoed through the trees. I should have stopped there. I should have just let it run away. Instead, when it took a step toward my journal again, I fired. I didn't mean to hit it. I was aiming for the ground beside it, just to scare it off. But my hands were shaking from exhaustion and fear. The bullet caught it in the chest. It looked down at the spreading dark stain in its fur, then back at me with what I could only describe as shocked betrayal. It collapsed slowly, making that same high call, but weaker now. The sound cut off abruptly. The forest went completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Then came the response, a roar so deep and loud I felt it in my bones. It came from everywhere at once, like the forest itself was screaming in rage. I ran back inside and barricaded the door, pushing my research table against it. Through the window, I could see dark shapes moving at the edge of the clearing, dozens of them, more than I'd seen before, all converging on the fallen juvenile. The largest one, the alpha male, I assumed knelt beside the small body. It touched the wound, then looked directly at my cabin. Even through the mist and distance, I could feel the hatred in that gaze. What happened next still haunts me. They didn't attack right away. They were smarter than that. Instead, they destroyed everything systematically. First, they tore apart my specimen tables. Then they pulled down my warning systems, snapping the strings, crushing the bells. They found every colored flag I'd placed in the forest and piled them in front of my door. They were sending a message. They knew everything about me and my work. As night fell, they began testing the cabin's defenses. A window shattered on the east side. The roof creaked as something heavy climbed across it. The door shuddered with each massive blow. I huddled in the bathroom, the smallest room with no windows, clutching my rifle and the satellite phone that hadn't worked since I arrived. The battery was dead anyway. By midnight, they had torn off part of the roof. I could hear them above me, moving wooden beams aside like they were twigs. Soon they would reach me. I had one chance left, the root cellar. Every old cabin in these parts had one, and I'd found the trapdoor under a rug my first week here. I hadn't gone down there because of the spiders, but now it was my only option. I slipped into the kitchen while they worked on the roof. The trapdoor creaked as I lifted it, and I froze, certain they'd heard. But the noise from above continued. I lowered myself into the damp darkness below, pulling the trapdoor shut above me. The earthy smell of potatoes long rotted filled my nose as I crouched in the blackness, trying not to breathe too loudly. Above me, I heard the roof finally give way. Heavy footsteps moved through my cabin, overturning furniture, smashing equipment. I heard my microscope hit the floor, the tinkle of broken glass vials, the thud of books being thrown against walls. They were erasing me, just as thoroughly as they'd erased the loggers 60 years ago. Eventually, the sound stopped. Had they given up? Or were they waiting, knowing exactly where I was hiding? I stayed in that cellar until dawn, muscles cramping, too terrified to move. When I finally pushed the trapdoor open a crack, sunlight streamed in. The cabin was destroyed, everything broken, torn, or scattered. But there were no dark shapes waiting for me. I climbed out slowly, rifle ready, and looked around at the devastation. Every piece of my research was gone. My specimens, my notes, my equipment all ruined, but I was alive, and the trail out would be passable today. I grabbed my emergency backpack from its hiding place under the floorboards and stepped outside, ready to run. That's when I saw what they'd left for me in the center of the clearing: Kaiser's collar, my compass, and a perfect circle of the toxic mushrooms I'd been studying, the same ones I'd used to make the paste for my windows and doors. They were telling me something. But what? I stared at the items arranged in the clearing, my mind racing. Why these specific things? Kaiser's collar, my compass, and the toxic mushrooms. It felt like a message I was supposed to understand. Then it hit me. The mushrooms I'd been studying weren't just toxic to humans. My research notes had shown they were especially deadly to mammals with higher body temperatures like the Sasquatch would have, being so large. The forest had been their home for centuries, maybe thousands of years, according to those cave paintings. But in the 3 weeks I'd been here, I'd collected these mushrooms, handled them with gloves, stored them in sealed containers, and even ground some into powder for testing. Had my samples leaked? Had I accidentally contaminated their territory? The juvenile had been curious, handling my specimens without protection. If it had touched the toxic samples and then touched its face or food, I felt sick. The death I thought was self-defense might have been something else entirely. I might have been poisoning them slowly from the moment I arrived. I had to leave before the adults returned. The trail would be dry enough now, and I could make it to the highway. By nightfall, if I hurried, I grabbed my backpack and started toward the path leading out. I'd gone about 50 yards when I heard the sound of heavy breathing from the trees ahead. They were waiting for me. They'd known I would run. I turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, toward the cliff face I'd marked with red flags. It was dangerous, but there was a narrow path down that would eventually lead to the river. If I could reach the water, I might have a chance. Something told me they wouldn't follow me across the running water. The forest seemed to work against me as I ran. Branches whipped my face. Roots rose up to trip me. The mist thickened until I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Behind me, I heard them moving, not running, but walking steadily, confidently. They knew these woods better than I ever could. They knew I had nowhere to go. The ground began to slope. Upward, I was nearing the cliff. My lungs burned, and the old pain in my ribs flared with each gasping breath. Something whistled past my ear, a rock, thrown with incredible accuracy. Another followed, striking my backpack. They weren't trying to kill me. They were hurting me. I burst out of the tree line and skidded to a halt at the cliff edge. Below me stretched the valley, beautiful and terrible in the morning light. The river glinted silver in the distance, but the drop was at least 100 feet of jagged rock. I turned to face the forest just as they emerged from the trees. There were 5 of them now. The 2 adults I'd seen before, and 3 others, slightly smaller but still massive compared to me. They moved with an eerie grace for creatures so large, spreading out to block any escape route back into the trees. The largest one, the alpha male, stepped forward. In the clear light, I could see its face properly for the first time. The features were a disturbing blend of human and ape, with deep-set eyes that held unmistakable intelligence and rage. It carried something. The body of the juvenile I'd shot. It laid the small body on the ground between us, then straightened to its full height, watching me, waiting. I still had my rifle, but only 2 bullets left. Not enough for all of them, and I knew shooting would only make things worse. "I'm sorry," I said, though I knew they couldn't understand the words. "I didn't know about the mushrooms. I didn't mean to hurt you." The alpha male tilted its head, as if listening. It made a low sound, almost like speech, but not quite. The others responded. With similar sounds, they were communicating, deciding my fate. I took a step backward, feeling loose stones shift under my heel. The cliff edge was inches away. The alpha took a step toward me, raising one massive hand. I flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, it pointed at my backpack, then at its own mouth, then made a choking gesture. "The mushrooms," I whispered. "You know they're poison." It nodded. It actually nodded. A crazy idea formed in my mind. I slowly unzipped my backpack and pulled out my specimen book, the only piece of my research that had survived because I'd kept it with my emergency supplies. I opened it to the pages with the toxic mushrooms, then set it on the ground and backed away. The Alpha approached cautiously and picked up the book with surprisingly dexterous fingers. It flipped through the pages, stopping at my drawings of the mushrooms. It made that speech-like sound again, and one of the others brought forward a branch bearing similar mushrooms, but with subtle differences. It placed this beside my book. I stared in amazement. They were showing me a different variety, one that looked almost identical to what I'd been studying, but with a slightly grayer cap and thinner stem. There are two types, I said slowly. I've been collecting the poisonous ones. The Alpha nodded again, then pointed to the forest, then to the juvenile's body, then back to my book. The message was clear. My research had consequences. Their young one had paid the price for my ignorance. I slowly reached for my book. I'll destroy my samples. I'll tell others these mushrooms are off limits for research. Just let me go, and I promise no one will come back here. The Alpha watched me, its deep eyes unreadable. For a long moment, no one moved. Then it stepped back, creating a narrow path between its companions, leading back into the forest away from the trail out, but also away from the cliff edge. It was offering me a third option. I hesitated. Going with them seemed insane, but something in the Alpha's gaze held more than anger now. There was sadness there, and something like recognition. We were both researchers, in our way, both protective of our territories, both capable of violence when threatened. "Where would you take me?" I asked, though I knew they couldn't answer. The Alpha simply turned and started walking into the forest, pausing once to look back at me. I had a choice to make. Try to run for the trail out, knowing they could easily catch me, jumped from the cliff, with little chance of survival, or follow them into the unknown depths of the forest. I took a deep breath and stepped away from the cliff edge. I would follow, at least until I could find another chance to escape. As we moved deeper into the forest, the mist closed around us like a living thing. The Alpha lead, with two others behind me. They didn't touch me or threaten me. They simply walked, assuming I would follow. We traveled for hours, moving through parts of the forest I'd never seen. The trees grew older, larger, the undergrowth thicker. There were no human trails here, no signs anyone had ever passed this way. Just as the light began to fade, we reached a clearing with a rock face similar to the one where I'd found the bones. But this opening was larger, the entrance partially hidden by hanging vines. The Alpha stopped and pointed inside. I passed it into the darkness. My scientific curiosity battled with my fear. What was in there? Their home. My grave. I took a step forward, then another. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, I saw more cave paintings covering the walls. But these weren't like the ones I'd seen before. These showed humans and Sasquatch standing together, working together, teaching each other. And freshly painted, still glistening wet, was a new image. A female figure with a book, standing between the tall creatures and something that looked like the mushrooms. They were offering me a choice to stay, to learn from them as they learned from me, to be a bridge between our worlds. Or perhaps it was simpler than that. Perhaps they just wanted to keep an eye on the dangerous human who had brought poison into their home. I stood at the threshold, neither in nor out, caught between two worlds. Behind me stretched the forest path that would eventually lead back to civilization. Ahead lay mysteries no human had ever documented. The Alpha waited patiently, its eyes ancient and knowing. I took a deep breath and made my choice.